you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. I'm blessed.
That's good. So thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this video series. This is for Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. We're doing a 7-day video series featuring one video a day. So Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week was created to get college students educated about homelessness and involved in their communities to help the homeless. So this video is about housing and healthcare. So why don't we start with a little bit about your story?
Well, I am a native Washingtonian. I grew up middle class, and I had an incident that happened that caused me to pick up drugs. And that was at 13 years old. And I had 3 children. 2 were in my addiction. And I went to recovery to get off of my drugs. And now I am going on the 24th of this month, I'll be 21 years clean.
And now a lot of people also don't really understand addiction. So how did it start? How did your drug use start?
Well, my mother decided to tell me that my birth father had died. And I grew up with a man in the house thinking that he was my father. And I was devastated and I was hurt. I couldn't understand how a man could have a child and not ever see, talk, communicate at all to that child when he was once in my life as a baby. He just totally left me. So I was looking for love in all the wrong places, even though my dad, who is my stepdad, but I call him dad, and my mom loved me, it wasn't the love of my father. And I stepped outside the house looking for love in all the wrong places through my friends. And I did what my friends did. And that's how I got caught up in doing drugs.
Congratulations. So thank you so much for telling a little bit about your story. How did you become homeless?
I lost my apartment. I was working and still doing drugs, but I got behind in my rent and I couldn't get caught up. And so the marshals came and put me out my apartment.
How long were you homeless for?
It may not seem like a long time, but I was homeless for 3 months, but I was pregnant at the same time.
Oh gosh. Yeah, any length of time of homelessness still is horrendous, and especially being pregnant as well. How did you handle that?
It was hard. I couch surfed a lot. And in my 3rd month of being homeless, I had a dream that something was going to happen to my baby. And I called the counselor that I had his business card because I was going to my prenatal appointments. And he told me when I was ready to give him a call. And I called him when I woke up crying. And he told me to go to DC Detox. And that's what I did to start my journey of recovery.
Now, a lot of people don't know couch surfing is still considered as being homeless, and because you don't have a permanent address. So like legally, it's still seen as being homeless. And it is, because you're going from couch to couch to couch. You don't have a permanent place of your own, and being pregnant on top of that, it's, and plus having bad dreams, everything like that, like the anxiety dreams. I totally empathize with you on that. It's so great that you were able to call somebody for assistance. Did you get on any waiting lists for housing or anything like that?
Once I got into a recovery program, it was called Demeter Northwest. They had me go down to housing and get on the list for homeless. And it took me a year to date that I signed up to get my voucher for housing. And my program that I was in, Unified Families, didn't want me to keep my voucher. They wanted me to turn it back in because I wasn't finished the program. And I told them, I know DC, that might be another year and a half before I get my voucher back. So I just took my voucher and left the program a year early.
Hmm. Now, a lot of people also don't know that the lack of affordable housing is actually the #1 reason for homelessness. So how hard was it to find residential treatment?
Well, being that I was in Unified Families, they were associated with Center for Mental Health. It wasn't a residential program per se, because I went there every day. But the program that I lived in was a residential program, and I went to Demeter Northwest first from Detox, and the people at Demeter Northwest found me a place at Unified Families. So a part, and Unified Families is an apartment that you maintain, but they have supervision over you.
Was there any difficulty in finding help with addiction?
Yes, it was, how can I say? It was trying. It was more trying than difficult because I had to go around and find these places to get the help that I needed.
So tell me more, what were some of the hurdles that you faced?
A lot of bureaucratic paperwork and getting in lines.
Hmm. And was it hard to find a place that would help you because you were pregnant?
Yes, because there's not too many programs that were catered to women that were pregnant.
Mm. And
Um,
yeah, so tell me more, what were some of the challenges that you had to face in finding housing?
when at Detox, I had to wait. Detox is a 7-day program, and I had to wait 12 days at Detox to get a place because I had to wait for a bed at Demeter Northwest, because Demeter Northwest catered to women that were pregnant and had other children. And I had my son. So I had, when I went there, I didn't have my son with me, but he came eventually.
Mm. And so was it hard finding a safe place to recover?
Once I was in those 2 programs, they were a safe place. Detox, people were still doing, finding ways to get drugs in there and doing drugs. And it wasn't as safe as going to Demeter Northwest or Unified Families. It was a total safe place. And I could go to my NA meetings and come back and be safe, knowing that no one in there would have drugs.
You were able to have your child in a safe environment, correct?
Yes, when I became homeless, I gave him to his mentor, and his mentor and his wife kept my son until I had a safe place to have him. And once I got into Demeter Northwest where I could have my son, they brought my son to me. And so I was pregnant with my son in a safe environment, learning how to stay clean.
And I'm sure that was a very difficult process. And so your pregnancy, was it healthy otherwise?
Yes, it was healthy. Uh, she was born breech. She was face up instead of face down. And she had sleep apnea because she was on a machine at birth where it monitored, she would stop breathing sometimes. So she was on that, and they couldn't understand why she had that issue because she was a healthy baby, healthy size-wise. And so I had to deal with that for about 3 months on the monitor. But other than that, she was healthy. She is 20 now.
Good. And that must have been hard being in recovery, trying to make sure that you had housing, because you said you were on the waiting list for a year. And then at the same time, your child is, your new child is on a machine in a hospital.
Yeah, I had a lot of anxieties. My mother was ill. She had Alzheimer's. And I didn't get to see her. I talked to her every Sunday on the phone. She knew who I was, but I never got to see her. And trying to do my studies and stuff on staying clean, reading the NA book, and being a mom was stressful.
And how important was it for you to be able to find affordable housing?
It was very important because I was on public assistance, and public assistance only gave me $300 and some to pay for rent, utilities, my personal needs for myself and my children. So I had to find something very affordable.
And how much was the average rent when you were looking at places? It was more than $300, right?
Yeah, it was more than $300. It was over at least 1,000.
And so how were you able to find someplace?
Being that I had my housing voucher, they paid for most of the rent, and I paid a portion. I paid 30% of my income to housing.
And so you were able to also find a job and find employment?
No, I couldn't find employment because of my disabilities, my mental disabilities. So I didn't look for a job. I volunteered every now and then through the Center for Mental Health, but I wasn't gainfully employed.
So how did it feel when you were finally able to find affordable housing?
I was relieved, and the way I found my house that I was in, one of the counselors at Center for Mental Health knew a lady that had a house for rent, and that's how I got the house, by word of mouth.
And so I know you felt relieved, and like, what other emotions were there? Like, what was something that you said to your son?
I told him he would never have to worry about me going back this way again, meaning going back to drugs, being homeless, having him separated from me. he had his own room because the apartment we were in was a 1 bedroom. He would sleep on the sofa and I had the bedroom. So he had his own room and he was elated. And my daughter, my baby girl, had her own room. So we were comfortable. And that's what I wanted because I grew up in a house and I wanted my kids to know what it was like to grow up in a house. I didn't want an apartment.
So that first week inside your house, how did it feel? How did it feel for you after everything that you had been through?
I was still unpacking, so I was kind of anxious because I can't stand boxes. I'm OCD a little bit, and I had to hurry up and get rid of those boxes. So I was kind of anxious to get these boxes out of the house. And because I was buying things as I was in treatment, residential treatment, I was buying things for my new place because I knew that my Lord and Savior would protect me and give me what I prayed for. And so once I got those boxes out, I was relieved and I'm an interior designer by degree. And so I was excited about decorating my house.
That's great. That's great. And so thank you so much for sharing your story. And for the college students watching, what would you like them to know?
That every homeless person has a backstory, and they had trauma most of them had trauma in their life. And it's not always drugs that cause them to become homeless. That is in my story, but not in everyone's story. It could be financial or health issues and not being able to pay their health, their health. I can't think of the word right now.
Health bills, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Hospital
Their health bill, their hospital bills, their doctor bills. And so, and don't just be able to acknowledge a homeless person when you see one. Say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or just nod your head if you don't want to say anything, because on the streets, homeless people don't get to speak to people in a casual conversation, and they don't get to hear their name said for years unless they have the friends that they are a family with of other homeless people will say their name, or some people don't even know their name. And so just to be conscious of what you say and how you act when you see one. Don't clutch your bag and stuff like that, because they're not going to grab your bag or they're not going to rob you. They just want to be acknowledged and feel a part of the human race.
And how did you get involved with speaking for the National Coalition for the Homeless?
My neighbor across the street from where I lived in the house was the CEO of Street Sense, which is the homeless newspaper. And he heard my story. He wanted me to write my story in the paper, but I was at Howard University taking, I think, 14 credits. And so I was busy. And I thought I couldn't do it then, but I would find something to do once I graduate. And I found out, he told me about the Speakers Bureau. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to tell my story and help other people understand what homelessness is.
And you do it so well. And so you did graduate from Howard University. How was that getting your education?
That was, I enjoyed it so much. It was something I wanted to do. I was learning something that I loved, interior design. And I was on the dean's list 4 out of my 5 semesters there. And I got new friends that I'm still in contact with now. And I graduated in 2012.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your story. And is there any other final thoughts that you would like people to know about the finding affordable housing and the difficulties?
It's my daughter, my baby girl wants me to move. I'm happy where I am, but she wants me to move because she's not happy. And I've been looking at places and they're expensive and they're small. Their apartments are small. And I don't want to, if I move, it would have to be into another house because the apartments are too small, and trying to find a house that's in my vouchers criteria is going to be a little hard. So I've been not gainfully looking. I've been looking here and there for a place.
Right. Well, contentment is also important. And so I'm glad that you did get your house, even though it was a long fight.
Yeah. And the houses I got, I was in 2 houses and 1 apartment after the first initial house. And it was like a job looking for a place, because you had to be looking in all different sites, even the housing site. And to find it, I found one place on not YouTube, it was a advertising site. And the other one I just drove by and found it and called it, and I got that place. But just to look for a place is really hard, because you have to do your homework and you have to put out a lot of money for application fees.
And also, was it hard to find recovery treatment? Did you have any transportation to go to those places? And were there curfews and certain restrictions?
I used public transportation for everywhere. I didn't have a car. I had to take my son to school on the bus, and then come back and catch the bus to my recovery program. And then it got to the point where I had to teach him how to catch the bus, because I had to be on the van to go to my recovery program, but I couldn't take him to school. So I had to teach him how to catch the bus. And it was 2 buses to get to school and 2 buses home. And that was very worrisome for a 2nd grader on the bus by themselves. I would sit at the window at night waiting for him to come home, and so glad that he made it home, because you can't trust everyone out there. And one time he fell asleep on the bus and missed his stop and had to walk. And he made him home late, and I was worried. I didn't know what to do. And I saw him coming down the street. I was like, thank you.
And what year was this? Just for all the current college students.
This was 2001.
And cell phones were not like they were today.
No.
Like most people did not have a cell phone. And if they did, it was not a smartphone. So it's not like you could just call him when he was late.
Yeah, he couldn't call. And I didn't have a cell phone either. And so we didn't get cell phones till I went to school at UDC at night. And I had to leave them in the house by themselves. So I got 2 cell phones so I could get in contact with them.
And were there any restrictions on your, I know you talked about how your housing voucher, they at first even wanted to take it away from you because you hadn't finished the program. Were there any other restrictions like curfews and, you having to pay a portion of your rent? Sometimes that's a problem with these recovery places.
Well, with the recovery, the Unified Families, they took a part of my TANF, which is temporary aid for families, needy families, because that was going to be my security deposit for my housing. But in the residential recovery, we had restrictions. We had to be in by a certain time. We had to take urines when we came in. We had to be in bed the kids had to be in bed by a certain time. And so that was for being 45 years old with those restrictions, and was kind of difficult because I'm grown. I know how to do this for my kids. I know when to send them to bed and blah, blah, blah.
Right. And it was probably also hard for your son because there's certain activities he can't do if he has to be in bed by a certain time.
Yeah, there were no activities. He wanted to play football, but I couldn't do it while we were in that program.
But he was probably excited for football when you got your housing, correct?
Yes, when I got my housing, he joined the neighborhood football team, Woodridge, and I would walk him down there every day and walk back. It was a hill going back up, but I got my exercise, but he got what he wanted. And he played basketball in school, in elementary school.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for inviting me in to tell my story.